All right, we will go ahead and get started. Give a couple extra minutes for folks to trickle in. Hello, everybody. My name is Alex Taylor. I am Senior Business Investment Manager for Arlington Economic Development on the Business Investment Group. I just want to thank everyone for joining today to learn about Ballston's exciting future. We thought we would pivot a little bit off of COVID and the topics kind of the moment. Give a little bit of a look ahead on the future. Folks seem to have a bit of COVID fatigue and Zoom fatigue, so we thought we would look to the future of Ballston and talk about something that's a little bit more exciting, and we would host it on GoToMeeting so that you didn't have to worry about getting onto Zoom again. There's so much going on in the community despite the current pandemic, and as we start to look at 2021 and beyond, we wanted to talk about some of the impactful changes that will be happening in Ballston. Ballston's combination of office, residential, and retail really creates an 18-7 environment that a lot of commercial districts strive to achieve, and residential for that matter. And it's really appealing for a wide swath of people, whether it's residents, workers, visitors, people that come in to enjoy under normal circumstances our great dining and entertainment venues as well. So Ballston's one of the obviously the major commercial districts in Arlington County, and we thought we would kick it off since there's so much going on there, talking about that neighborhood. This will be the first in a series of non-COVID webinars that we're going to be doing. We're also doing a separate series of COVID back to work discussions as well, but this is focused a little bit more on when we get back to the office, what you can expect to see. Arlington has always had a very intentional vision for its neighborhoods. A lot of planning and intention goes into making them what they are and what you see today and in the future. And Ballston is really undergoing an evolution that will shape the neighborhood for years to come. So we thought it would be great to talk about that and kind of give you an update on everything Ballston going forward, really looking at the next 5 to 10 years. So if you're representing a company that's going to be in the market, or you are a company that is interested in looking at Arlington or Ballston specifically, this will be hopefully educational for you and let you know about what is going on. And if you live in Ballston, even better, you can kind of hear about what the vision for the future is. So with that, I'm today's host, so I will be popping back in at the end of the first panel to moderate the second panel, which will be on kind of the future of the tech ecosystem in Ballston. But the first panel we'll cover really the placemaking aspect of Ballston and what it'll look like in the next 5 to 10 years. What will its residents and office workers experience, as they return to the neighborhood for the first time, whenever that might be, hopefully sooner rather than later. But if it's in the late winter or early spring, there will be a lot of changes, and it'll be almost a year since most folks have been in the neighborhood if they don't live there. And our conversation will be moderated by our own director, AED's director, Telly Tucker, and we'll also feature Tina Leone from the Ballston Bid, Kevin Shushan from Shushan Companies, and AED's Director of Real Estate Development, Mark McCauley. So I will now turn it over to Telly, and I will see you back here in a bit for our second panel on the tech ecosystem, which will be around 2:30 to 2:40. And Telly, I hand it over to you to introduce our panelists, and I'm going to pull each of you up on screen and take myself down so that you can go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Alex, and good afternoon to all the listeners and viewers out there today. It's my pleasure to be the moderator today, and for once I don't have to sit in the hot seat. I get to put the pressure on our panelists today. We've got a who's who of panelists. As Alex mentioned, we've got Tina Leone, who many of you probably already know is the CEO of the Ballston Bid, and we've got Kevin Shushan, who's the principal of the Shushan Company. And we've got Mark McCauley, who's the director of the real estate group with Arlington Economic Development. So welcome to our panelists. And let me just kind of double down on something that Alex said earlier about the Ballston community. So I'm a Ballston resident. I moved here in February, and Tina and I joke about that all the time because they're like, Arlington has a couple of business improvement districts, and it's like, well, which one should I live in? And Tina said, well, the only one, of course, and that's Ballston. And so I am a Ballston resident, and I chose to live there for many of the reasons that Alex mentioned. a nice mix of retail and restaurant and hospitality and office. Our office is in Ballston as well. And so I'm enjoying, in the midst of the pandemic, I'm enjoying my first 8 months here. Without further ado, I'm going to jump into our first question. And I'm going to start with Tina, actually. Tina, despite the pandemic, I know that's been the hot topic of conversation for the last 6 months, but Ballston has continued to see a development boom, even in the midst of this. New dining, housing, retail, et cetera. For listeners that may not have visited Ballston since the shutdown, can you fill them in on the neighborhood? Like what's exciting, what's new, what's maybe pending additions as well? I think you might be muted there. Oh, I think perhaps, Alex, let's double check to make sure that the...
I just unmuted you, Tina, so let's see if that works. Sorry.
Now I got it. I was like, I'm pressing the button, it's not working. Yeah, so I mean, despite everything that's going on, thank you, Telly, and thanks AED for inviting me here today. Always happy to talk about Ballston and what's happening, and it really hasn't slowed down very much. Aside from people wearing masks around Ballston, you wouldn't know anything was really going on. I mean, it's of course, we maybe not as many people as we've had, but it's still very vibrant. And the deliveries just keep coming. So, I mean, you probably just recently heard, as far as dining, we've got Taco Bamba on its way, open very soon. Bar Tacos opening up. El Rey, Hawker is just announced. There's the Salt Line that's coming, and Kevin's building that's on its way as well. We're excited about that. And then retail, I mean, come on, the big news is Target. I mean, it's like, how could you, it's amazing. It's 40,000 square feet, in the Waycroft, and I've been there a couple times already myself, and it's bustling in there. So, and there's even food, there's even groceries in there as well. So, and then Union Kitchen opened up. Had a great conversation on our Ballston Connect podcast with Colin, the proprietor of Union Kitchen, and then of course Vita Fitness, an amazing new gym that's open. I can't even call it a gym; it's a full-fledged fitness facility. Anything you want in there. Amazing measures that they're taking to keep it as safe as possible for the members. And then we've had a couple of other another gym open up, Training Ground Arlington. So and the activity continues to happen, as well as development. So I know Kevin could talk more about 4040 Wilson and that beautiful new building where Vita is and Salt Line's coming. Jay Soul, from Jefferson Apartments on Fairfax Drive. And then the Waycroft, as I just mentioned, by the Saul, that's now opened up back in August and is already, I believe, close to about 50% leased. So very exciting, and still a lot of activity and a lot of vibrancy happening in Ballston.
Thanks, Tina. She's spot on, and I can validate some of what she's saying by the sense of vibrancy still there. We heard just recently from a real estate broker in the community that they had taken clients to look at certain properties in the district, and then they had come to Ballston, and they said it was night and day compared to the amount of activity that was going on in Ballston. They were really impressed, and it reflected well in the community with the client that they were showing around. So let's keep that activity and that sense of critical mass there. You mentioned the 4040 Wilson building. You mentioned that I think Salt Line is going to be opening there, and we've got Kevin as one of our panelists as well. Kevin, can you talk about, as the developer behind one of these new buildings at 4040 Wilson, can you talk about the experience delivering a property amidst the pandemic, and how has your team responded to the impact of the office and residential markets?
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Just making sure. And again, thank you to Tina, and thank you, Telly and Mark, and everyone for having me today. But yeah, it's just what I really will say is it's unprecedented what we're dealing with right now. I mean, we've never experienced anything like this. at least in my career thus far. And really with even talking to my father and others, it's just unique. It's not as it was, with the crash of '08 or even, 9/11 years ago. It's really different in what it's doing to the market. What I will say is, what I love about Ballston, and I can talk about Tina and the bid. When this all came up, I came to Tina several months ago and said, Tina, can we organize some periodic phone calls with all the landlords and just have a discussion about, what are you guys doing? Because there is no playbook for this. But what are you guys doing in your buildings? What are you hearing from tenants? What are you doing to prepare and to combat what's going on? And that really did two things. It let all the landlords get together and kind of make sure that there is a similar game plan. Having one landlord do one thing and another one not do it, it's really not good for anybody. And no one's really trying to one up the other. So it was kind of just getting everyone together and getting on the same page, learning from one another and kind of coming up with a plan. And we had, I think, 11 or 12 landlords from the bid on those calls. It was very useful. We learned from each other and prepared going forward. There's several different things that you're seeing landlords do across the board. I could talk about it forever, but I got to just, watch my time here. But you're seeing a lot of things. I'll just give you some examples. As a landlord, we're increasing cleaning by a bit. So it's adding another day porter, basically a person that's in the building cleaning touch points. That's kind of the buzzword as of late, but areas, doorknobs, buttons, handles, everything that we can. We're making sure we've got more people in there cleaning those touch points on a steady basis throughout the entire day. We're promoting mask wearing in all the buildings, making sure people are wearing masks. We're putting signs up to educate people about maintaining social distance. We're putting hand sanitizer so they clean their hands. We've improved the air filter system. I mean, if you're in the market, you've heard this, you have everything from a MERV 8 to a MERV 13. If you hear that term, MERV 13 is kind of the highest one you can get now, just to kind of filter the air a little bit more in these buildings. We're instituting social distancing in these amenity spaces, making sure that, if a gym holds 40 people, a little 1,000 square foot gym in the building holds 40 people, maybe we're putting that down to 20 people so we can maintain social distancing between the equipment. And, we could go on and on about it, but that's really the thing. Those are really the things that we as a landlord are doing. And they really are different for any building. We're communicating with the tenants, making sure the tenants have the opportunity to buy in, give their suggestions, make sure their staff it feels safe in the building as well. So we've been doing that on both the office and the residential side. And those are kind of the main issues that the main precautions we've been taking. But in the end, you really got to educate your customer base, be it the office side or the residential side. So that's kind of what's been going on the landlord side. I could talk more about retail and office, but I just wanted to stop there and see if anyone wanted me to embellish on anything.
Sure, Kevin. Maybe so. If you could maybe talk a little bit about how do you see your property as what I would describe as a vertically integrated mixed-use project. How do you see that complementing Ballston's evolving environment after COVID?
Yeah, so I've thought about that as well. And I guess what I would say is that building was built, I mean, we planned these buildings years and years in advance. So that building was underway, 5-6 years ago. We were designing that building and getting it going. It just happened to deliver right around when COVID tended to come out, tended to break out into the market. So the one thing I think is unique about 4040 Wilson is the landlord at the time wanted to find a way to build this 22-story structure in a market where the office market was not really supporting building another 400,000 square foot building. So as a result, we got a little bit creative. We did a vertically mixed use building, which enabled us to build the entire structure with the top half being residential, the bottom half being office. And then on top of that, we converted space on the P1 level to retail, which enabled us then to get the Vita deal done. And as Tina said, that's a 40,000 square foot gym. So I guess what I would say is what I like about 4040 Wilson is the county worked with us to get creative, to find a way to get that building built, and didn't just cross their arms and say, well, that has to be zone as office, it's an office building. So that was one thing that I really like about that building. It is new. It is different. Typically vertically mixed-use buildings you see in other markets that are 50, 60, 80 stories tall. We found a way to do it. And what we really had to do on our side was create, we always say, a building within a building. We want the building to, on the exterior, look like a single mixed-use tower. But on the inside, we want residents to view it as they can walk into their own building and go up to their unit and not be affected by the office tenants, and vice versa. Avalon Bay's got their headquarters in there. It's a publicly traded company. We can't have residents interfering with Avalon Bay. So we really put a lot of thought into that. Myself focused on the office, and Kelly Shushan focused on the residential in our office. We thought about every single scenario. What about the pool area? What about the parking garage, where uses could conflict? And we really thought it out. And as Tina said, we're 60+% leased on the resi and 52% leased on the office. I think we've done a pretty good job making sure that the customer base is safe, feels comfortable in the building. And it's almost unnoticeable that they're atop an office building, or it's almost unnoticeable the office tenants are below a residential building. So that's really where the project is today. We continue to push on the leasing on both sides.
Thank you, Kevin, and I can concur. For anyone who hadn't seen the building, it is impressive. Not only is it the tallest building in Ballston, it's got a sweet swimming pool on the roof. So for those of you who haven't been to see the 4040 building, make sure you make an appointment to get there and see that building. I think it's a perfect segue to Mark. Mark, including the developments that Tina mentioned earlier, that Kevin highlighted as well, Ballston has welcomed over 2,000 housing units, 2,000 in the past 3 years, with several developments still in the pipeline. Can you maybe touch a little bit, Mark, on how the thousands of new residents are impacting activity in the neighborhoods, and what office tenants might gain from the infusion of new housing options?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I mean, when we look at our neighborhoods, we talk a lot at the county level about balance and use mix balance, and many of our sector plans that are next generation, Crystal City, Roslyn, others, we're striving to achieve balance. In Ballston, we started with balance and have progressed since the early 80s sector plan. And so when you look at a neighborhood that has 8 million square feet of office, now approaching 9,000 residential units, 1,000 hotel rooms, all supporting 1 million square feet roughly of retail, it's an incredibly balanced neighborhood. And what that means is, and some people have already sort of referenced it, is one, just people on the street. So day or night, there's activity. And so if you're an office tenant looking for a place that's not going to be dead at a certain time, 6 o'clock, and it seems like tumbleweeds are rolling down the street, Ballston is just the exact opposite, where it gets a new life every sort of part of the day. And obviously what that means for us is supporting the amenities in retail. So that the not only the amount of retail, for instance, but the types of retail. So a neighborhood that has 8 million square feet of office can also support, as Tina referenced, a 40,000 square foot Target, grocery stores, CVS, which are also valuable to office tenants, and other types of restaurants that really cater to both the daytime and nighttime population, where in a lot of office submarkets, as we know, the retail tends to really coalesce around that daytime demand. And so, the classic lunch place that closes at 6 p.m. We have in Ballston the sort of mix of uses that really cater to, I think, how people are changing how they view their offices. The second part of that is, from the county perspective, is how we treat our amenities and open spaces is much different in Ballston, because we are serving multiple constituents and residents and workers. So you get a really good mix of urban plazas, urban commerce-driven plazas and spaces, but also very typical sort of more passive open spaces. And I'll talk later about, Mosaic Park or the Ballston Pond as examples of, as an office worker, you can go somewhere and sit in a cafe and get a lunch or get a happy hour with your coworkers, but you can also go somewhere and read a book that's very quiet. And I think those environments are very difficult to do without the use mix and those residents that support all those amenities.
Thanks, Mark. Just to kind of follow on to that, Tina, I know I've seen lots of activity, including For all you dog lovers out there, I've definitely seen my share of folks walking dogs in Ballston. But can you speak to just the general activity in the neighborhood during the summer months of the pandemic? As I've witnessed a continued energy, even with a small share of the workers back in the office. Can you talk a little bit about that, Tina?
Yeah, so I mean, we've certainly continued our programs like all the other bids and partnerships. The word is pivot, and changing up how you're delivering your programs and events and activities. Switching to focusing on outdoor events and outdoor movies, smaller gatherings, very small gatherings in your car where it's safe. We're introducing comedy nights the same way, using the same method that we deliver the outdoor movies. You drive up, you have your space, you listen to the comedy show, and we'll be doing that's coming up very soon. The in-person events are no one's really doing much of that, but we are going to be doing music throughout Ballston. We'll have our Bobby McKee's group coming through. So more artwork, more beautification, those type of things have been really important to our constituents. Mark mentioned that there's about 9,000 residential units just within our tiny bid. I mean, you can go to our website and see how small, it's literally a 4 to 5 block radius around the metro, and that's already more housing units than downtown DC bid has, and that's our biggest bid anywhere. So anywhere around here. So what's great about also having that mix, that 50-50 mix that Mark mentioned, is that we had a crossover already of 20% of those who live here also worked in Ballston. So we already had that live, work, play going on to a healthy level. And now we've got those 20% of those people are home working, and then we have another 60% or so that are home working. And we still have a pretty good number of people working in the office due to the government, due to the DARPA and those other scientific research agencies and those companies that are working with them. They're still working. So, and a lot of those people are still coming in. I mean, the other types of professionals are obviously not, but so we still have this amazing, vibrancy going on the street, as we keep saying. So there's more, and there's more coming. My staff and I have been working on what Christmas market for, outdoor Christmas market for this year. It's been in demand. People keep asking us for that. So we're really, staying in touch with our residents and our employees that are here to see what can we do to make things better for you, improve your life while you're still working from home, or working in the office if you're still here, and then also to support our retailers and restaurants in particular is the Ballston Cares campaign to as Kevin mentioned, really try to express to the general public that our owners, our business owners, our retailers and restaurants are doing their very, very best to ensure that their spaces are as safe as possible. Following all the guidelines of Arlington, the governor's mandates, all of those things, and then going above and beyond. So there's decals that we put around on these retailers that are going that above and beyond. There's a lot of them in Ballston. Almost every one of them is doing their fair share and more to get people safe. And again, I got to mention Vita Fitness, which they have just gone way above and beyond with their measures that they've taken. To make sure that their members feel safe. I am a member now, and I have no worries at all. Everyone's wearing masks. They are constantly cleaning and disinfecting the entire gym all day long. It's really incredible that those of you who do yoga or use yoga mats, they have this machine that they put these through, after you use them. It's just they've really gone way above and beyond. So we want to make sure that that consumers know this, that the public is aware that our retailers and restaurants are really going way above and beyond to make sure that they're safe.
Yeah, absolutely, Tina. I can attest to that. I've witnessed many of that. Kudos to the residents and those people who work in Ballston for going above and beyond. I think they're really doing a good job of adhering to the health best practices. Kevin, real quick, we all recognize that the pandemic has had an adverse effect to leasing activity. But with an 18-7 environment, as Alex mentioned earlier, like Ballston, Are you still seeing interest, you know, from the commercial leasing activity standpoint, and what's the long-term outlook as you see it from, you know, 4040 Wilson's prospective tenants?
Yeah, so like you said, the office market is going to have to deal with this hit for a little bit. Whether that's a short term of people working a little bit more remotely while COVID gets resolved via vaccine, or if some of those jobs, you know, more permanently go home, you know, no one really knows yet, despite, you know, there's many white pages out there, people with their predictions for what's going to happen in the future. I don't think we really know yet until we get really deeper into 2021 probably. But we will have to get through a transition. We will have to deal with some sublease space for some tenants that are downsizing. So we'll have to work through that process. But when you look at 4040 Wilson and its place in the market, I think what you have to then look at is big blocks of space. So if you look at new construction and, you know, newer construction like 1812 down in Roslyn where Nestle went, and you focus on big blocks of available space that could take on, you know, a headquarters location for a big company, there aren't as many as you'd think in Northern Virginia in new construction. So 4040's 80,000 square feet of contiguous space that we have remaining. Again, we're like 52% leased on the office side with Avalon Bay, and ironically, the Infectious Disease Society of America is the other main tenant in there. And when you look at those 3 floors of contiguous space, it's really 3.5 floors. We think it's one of the best available new construction blocks in the market. So as tenants do look for new space, despite, you know, maybe underlying vacancy throughout the rest of the market, if the leases are out there, leases do expire, tenants will inevitably have to reconsider their future. We do think we're a great landing spot for someone that wants to come in, improve their location, be in a live, work, play environment, as we talked about before, be by all this good residential and retail that we just talked about. And then when you do talk about 4040 too, it's funny, we didn't know COVID was coming, but just because of the innovations in development, that building has a lot of stuff going on that are very appealing to tenants in light of the pandemic. We have more touchless technology. So the elevators are what's called destination dispatch. You can essentially swipe your fob, walk through a turnstile, and then walk right on, and it'll tell you go to elevator 2. You walk right into the elevator, you don't touch a button, and you get out the elevator. You get out of the elevator when you get on your floor. So it's more touchless technology. The same thing when you're going down in the parking garage. I mean, Vita is the same thing. When you're going into Vita, you swipe your phone via a Vita app, and you walk in. So we do have more touchless technology. We have our air conditioning system is a DOAS system, which is dedicated outside air supply. So there is more new air being brought into that building versus maybe a split system that we're used to in older buildings where the interior air is being just recirculated. So on top of the fact that we're increasing air filters, new air is coming into that building constantly and being recycled out. And again, that's not something that we knew. We didn't know COVID was coming, but it's just something that building got designed to have because it was a brand new building. And I do think a lot of tenants are going to really love that. And then the last thing I'll say is just before and after COVID, I do think tenants like this open floor plan, and 4040 Wilson has only, you know, essentially it's a wide open plan. There's no, older buildings have these columns 20 by 20 and every 20 feet by 20 feet, which architects don't love to plan around, and it makes it a little bit more difficult to design. But at 4040, I mean, I have a little floor plan. I don't even know if people can see it. But if you look at our floor plan here, it's just wide open. So you have these 2 interior columns towards the bottom, but it's just a wide open floor plan. And talking to Avalon and IDSA and the tenants that look at the building, that's one thing that they really, really love about 4040, because it's just kind of a blank canvas and allows for some flexibility in the future. So those are really the main points and the main things that I think benefit, and how I feel 4040 is well positioned for the next couple of years as we come out of this thing and look to settle up the office leasing.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. I know we've got another panel coming, but let's see, I think we may have time for one more question. Mark, I'm going to direct this one at you. So, you know, we talked a lot about the addition to the efforts by Ballston Bid, Arlington County. We know that there's some construction or planning for several improvement projects in the neighborhood, including Metro Station Plaza, Mosaic Park, a second metro entrance. Can you provide just a quick update on these and discuss how their impact on the neighborhood might be realized at the street level?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, so starting at the sort of open space level, Mosaic Park is actually delivering in the next couple of weeks. If you drive by it or walk by it, you'll see that there's still some activity. It's some last minute utility work going on, but that park, the majority of the park, we'll call phase 1, is opening up. And that's an example, as I mentioned before, of a sort of truly sort of a different type of park than you see just steps away from 8 million square feet of office, where it's really a lot of passive space as well as active recreation, places for kids. As we all adjust to this new time, people maybe bringing their kids into the office and need a place to bring them. And so a lot of those activities that are very neighborhood oriented, but obviously I think are tremendous amenities. So that is delivering now, literally in the next week or so. In terms of other important transportation infrastructure elements, so the what we call the Ballston multimodal study, which is dealing with the metro station. Right now, this year, we are wrapping up phase 1, which is dealing with the Fairfax Drive frontage and the bus areas, as well as the shelters, to upgrade that experience. Phase 2 will be finished next year, and that will deal with North Stewart Street, the plazas itself. And that's really important for us. With the addition of the new pedestrian bridge that was constructed as part of the Ballston Corridor redevelopment, this will now enhance an important key element of, I think, what drives office demand here in Ballston, which is accessibility and connecting that rail, bus, multimodal experience. Another one that will do that is the Beaver Pond, what we call the Ballston Pond now, but I'm aging myself. We used to call it the Beaver Pond when there were beavers still in there. But that's a major stormwater project. But what it will do is, because of the major investment in stormwater management, is create enhanced trail systems, as well as some really a cool element of an observation deck where you can kind of sort of look out over this very passive wetlands environment. Another example of where steps away from your office, you can get to a place that was truly sort of pristine and very quiet in terms of if you need a moment of the day to do that. And the last one is the second entrance on Fairfax Drive to the metro station. That has been delayed. That is relying upon state funding. State funding is no different than all our other funding mechanisms, where it's relying on tax revenues and in case of transportation, sales tax revenues. So that pie has gotten smaller, but there's still our CIP, which was a very limited CIP this year, did put continued design money into that. And we are looking to reapply for state funds next year and get to a design build by 2022. So that project has been delayed a little bit, but it's certainly moving forward. And more importantly, there's a project that may be built around it, a site plan, and that project can move forward independently. The metro station can move forward independently of a building being built adjacent to it. So that's going to be another exciting, particularly those that are sort of west of Glebe, north of the core, another way to get into the metro system. We think will be a great advantage for not only office tenants, but people that work, that live in Ballston as well.
Awesome, Mark. Thanks for that update. I just got a note. We got time for one more quick hitter. So I'm going to open this up to any one of the panelists, and just keep in mind we're going to keep our answers succinct as we can, maybe a sentence or two. But if you would, anyone on any of our panelists can answer this. Alex mentioned at the outset, given the long-term decisions made by the companies when selecting real estate, this webinar really is meant to provide a glimpse into Ballston's next decade. So if you're placing yourself in the role of a tenant representative, in a sentence or two, what's your top selling point to a prospective company or client for Ballston's future? Anybody want to take that in a sentence or two?
I will. I'm a landlord, so of course I will. But I guess what I would focus on are just a few things that every tenant is looking for, and that is being within a couple blocks of a metro station. That seems to be something that is not going to go away anytime soon. The cost of living, transportation, adding up. I think these companies have all tried to migrate within, the statistic is 3 blocks of a metro station. Of course, in Ballston, we have that. The residential, which we've talked about, we have that as well. The office market, we have that as well. good retail. We have that as well. The Mosaic Park, green spaces to provide more openness. We have that over maybe other competitive markets around us. We have more of the green space there. So really all those things kind of wrapped into one. That's where Ballston, I think, has done a great job of planning to have really its feet in all camps with the office, resi, retail, and the green space. So for that reason, I mean, I think Ballston is a great landing spot for many of those groups. So that's really how I would respond to that.
He's
Okay.
talking about the job now, Kevin. There's not much left to do.
Right. Yeah.
Spoken like a true business development guru, right?
Right.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I want to thank our panelists in this panel. We're going to bring Alex back now to transition to the second panel. Want to thank each of you for your time and for sharing with our audience today. On behalf of Arlington Economic Development, just want to say thanks. Keep up the great work and look forward to continue to collaborate with you.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you for having us.
Hey, everybody. We're back here. Thank you all for that great discussion. You know, I think it's pretty important to, it's easy to get stuck in this COVID environment and, you know, see that there's really a lot of optimism to have in the Ballston neighborhood. And this next panel is really going to focus on that quite a bit. You know, companies looking in the office market are really looking to make those long-term commitments. You know, we say 5 to 10 years. So it's really essential to frame what Ballston will look like for the next decade, and talking about the tech ecosystem, because I think it's pretty clear that there's a burgeoning ecosystem in Ballston. A lot of it has been there for decades, actually, because of DARPA, the Federal Innovation Office of Naval Research as well, and a lot of that has transitioned into the commercial side over the years. You know, so much was created in Arlington, from the internet to Siri, to GPS, and now we're seeing kind of a reemergence of the tech focus. And obviously technology talent is kind of the buzzword these days. It's what most companies want, at least most companies that are hiring, you know, well-educated tech enthusiasts. And Arlington and the DC metro region in general have, you know, tech talent in abundance, really. I think there's a recent study that showed that the DC metro market was actually one of the, I think, #1 tech market, tech talent market in the country, which was pretty astounding. But pre-pandemic, the labor markets were tight, specifically in these sectors. And obviously with Amazon's HQ2 project taking shape in National Landing, the Commonwealth of Virginia set aside $1 billion to invest in higher education for tech degrees and certifications. So today's panel will focus on that a little bit. Obviously, you know, Amazon's hired about 1,000 folks over in National Landing, and that's going to spur quite a bit of movement in the tech sector, with folks coming in from outside of the region to find jobs with Amazon and other tech companies, or what we'll talk about today as well, the university investments that will really boost the long-term pipeline of high quality tech workers. So we'll talk about that today in Ballston. We have and are honored to have Paula Sorrell from George Mason University, who will speak about the impacts of GMU's tech investments in the coming years. What kind of got buried in the Amazon announcement a couple years ago was that $1 billion that I mentioned that was going to be going towards the Virginia Tech Innovation Campus, but concurrently there's a huge investment going on at the Arlington campus of George Mason University. And so Paula will be speaking to that. And we also have Josh Massey, who represents some properties in Ballston and can speak to what, you know, the tenants are looking for and what he as a landlord is kind of offering out for what the future of Ballston's tech workforce will be. So welcome to Paula and Josh. I appreciate you all being here. If you see me looking up, I have the video on a second screen, so I'll pull it back down here in a minute. But just to jump off, Paula, I'll start with you. You know, when Arlington and Virginia announced the HQ2 project, gosh, almost 2 years ago now, which is pretty crazy to think about, the educational investments sort of got buried in the weed a little bit. And what was discussed on that front focused primarily on Virginia Tech and their innovation campus in Alexandria. But what many folks on this call might not realize is that George Mason was also part of that proposal and is in the process of creating, I already mentioned, pretty impactful project at the Virginia Square campus, which is pretty much in Ballston. So can you please, give us a quick overview of what these investments are and what the audience can expect to see in the next couple of years as that project takes shape? Obviously, there's probably some changes going on right now due to COVID, but looking at 2021 and beyond, I mean, these investments were probably going to be taking place physically a little further down the line. So do you mind jumping into that a little bit and give us an overview of what's taking place?
Sure. So it was prior to my arrival. So credit goes to the Mason senior staff who put a lot of work into the Amazon proposal as well. And if you look at the original HQ2 proposal, Mason produces more computer science degrees annually than anybody else combined, and in the state or in the region, and has created significantly more new degrees in the last 10 years in partnership with industry to meet future job demands. So it's sometimes overlooked, but Mason is the largest public university in Virginia. We've got 38,000 students. The larger investment by the Commonwealth is to be matched with by private sector funding from Mason, is a $250 million investment in a 500,000 square foot environmentally sustainable building, which will be our nexus for research activities and digital innovation defined broadly. We're excited to bring work in robotics, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity to the Arlington campus, but we're also equally excited to bring digital humanities, digital arts together with the already robust activities that are on the Arlington campus with the School of Law, Business, and Policy.
That's great. So the physical headquarters of the Institute of Digital Innovation, I believe, is a few years away, but you launched it in June. Is that correct? And can you explain how companies that are already in Ballston, and I guess companies that will be looking at Ballston in the next few years, can tap into that in the interim?
Yeah, so we're not going to be resting until the building's completion, which will actually be 2024. Right now, Mason's working on a 15,000 square foot pilot space, including it's part of an adjacent to Van Meter Hall to begin launching programming that spans the university and the community and technology commercialization and development. Because we intend to work in partnership with the other universities and the industry, we're focusing on collaborating and participating on the best of the best entrepreneurship and lab to market programming across the district. It's really an incredible asset to have this many universities and tech related companies within walking distance of one another.
Yeah, that's huge. And I guess it's a good transition over to Josh. My first question for you. Appreciate you joining us today. Obviously, talent is a driver for a lot of considerations, especially in the site selection process for companies. And how do you see the investment from GMU driving those conversations? And are the tenants that you're taking through and looking at the Ballston market, is that something that they're aware of? It's something that, when Paul mentions 2024 for the physical building, it seems far away, but if you're signing a 10-year lease, that's going to be smack dab in the middle of when you're sitting in your nice office in Ballston. So while those jobs are kind of churning out in a digital format now or a remote format now, over the next few years it'll be scaled up, and then 2024 you're gonna have this beautiful campus, just a couple blocks away. So what are you telling tenants that are coming through your buildings in Ballston, and how does that conversation go?
Yeah, again, thank you for having us. So I would say a couple things. One is really what we're telling the landlords, investors, and tenants alike. One of the big things that, as we just talked about, Washington, D.C. lacked for a significant period of time was that dynamic tech market, like a San Francisco or a Boston. We lack that world-renowned engineering focus, like the MITs and the Stanfords of the world. And with the GMU and the Virginia Tech announcements, I think we have totally transformed the DC metropolitan area, specifically Arlington, into a tech sector. And I think that does two things for the real estate market, and they both affect both the tenants from a demand standpoint and then the landlords from a further supply standpoint. we feel that these engineering firms, or sorry, engineering schools are just small incubators for us. They are small companies that are going to field these application developments that are going to attract VC funding and are only going to grow from an exponential standpoint or footprint from a square footage standpoint. That's one. Two, I think with this birth of these engineering schools and the continued funding from the state and the county to these schools, you're going to see an attraction, and we've seen it with Amazon. You're going to see an attraction from these mature tech behemoths looking to attract those individuals and graduates from these schools, or start to pick off smaller companies that these engineering groups have built and started to fund. So I think that snowball effect, those two things will continue or hopefully start to spur a larger demand for additional supply in office space in Arlington.
You mentioned, it's interesting, you talked about the tech companies coming in for the tech talent, but you also spoke about those engineering students coming out of school, creating companies. The Amazon effect in Seattle was that, yeah, you had a lot of talent come in to work for Amazon at their main headquarters, but you also had folks leaving Amazon to create companies that were then creating hundreds of jobs. And I think a lot of us are optimistic that'll eventually happen as the HQ2 campus takes hold in National Landing. But Paula, the startup Genome, I think it was, recently released its rankings for the best startup ecosystems in the world, and I think DC ranked number 11, and it rose 8 spots since 2000, since the last list. So a pretty big jump. What role do you see GMU's Institute of Digital Innovation playing in that local ecosystem, and how do you see that continuing to kind of foster the growth in that environment?
So what you just described is exactly what attracted me, and I'm sure others, to this region. I'm really excited to be working and living in Ballston. For the cross-section of innovation, economic development, and education, this is really the most amazing place to be in the country right now. Mason's very excited for what we think is very unique, bringing together not only computing and engineering, but integrating this together with policy, law, humanities, and the arts. And we're in the midst right now of a research and exploration process with the Commonwealth's support to get feedback from key partners in what we're calling the Innovation District, to help identify what a consortium might look like, how the players might best interact, governance structures, and et cetera, with the results to be released in Q1 of 2021. Right now, we're really focusing on the universities and university partnerships, because any place around the world, universities are considered to be anchors of an innovation district. And so if we can all get to working together, and Mason's been working and university partners have been working in the region together for a long time, but now there's an opportunity for the tide to lift all boats, and we plan on growing it from there.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think one thing that we've always benefited from is the research that comes out of the federal agencies that are in the region, but really in Ballston, and they've been in Ballston for a while now. Obviously, the NSF did move over to Alexandria, but you still have DARPA, Office of Naval Research, Air Force Research Center, all here in Arlington, and that's a lot of brain power, a lot of federal investment going into technology advancements, and that's something that's always kind of created the tech environment in Ballston and in Arlington and really in the region. And historically, the knock on our talent is that, yeah, it's great talent, but it's federally focused tech talent. And I think, we're starting to see a shift now in the makeup of our tech talent. Obviously, anybody can work in federal tech and commercial tech, but we're moving away from our reputation of being a federal tech environment. And I think the investments going in at George Mason are critical, and Virginia Tech as well, and other universities. I shouldn't leave anybody out, but all the universities in the region are really making investments in high tech degrees. and it's really to drive the innovation on the commercial side. And I think if you have, and this is just my own personal commentary, but if you have the base of the federal innovation that's really propped up our tech ecosystem for decades, and you have a burgeoning and probably robust, you mentioned all those things at the beginning of your commentary about how this region has everything from an educational standpoint, federal, commercial. 5 to 10 years from now, I feel like you're going to have this environment where the tech is just going to be, people see it coming, but I really think 5 years from now, people are going to look at Northern Virginia and Arlington specifically, and it will be the hub of innovation because of the federal research dollars propped up, on top of the fact that GMU, Virginia Tech, Marymount, Maryland are all making heavy investments in the tech talent pipeline, and it's going to be focused on commercial tech. But I mentioned the federal piece. I mean, does George Mason have a plan to work with the defense contractors, the defense innovators, the federal innovators that are already in the market? Obviously, you're going to be churning out this talent that isn't going to be discriminating on when they're going to get jobs. But how are you all working with either large corporations, but also the existing federal agencies, if at all, to kind of make sure that folks are coming out of the university and prepared to enter the workforce at a high level?
Yeah, a number of my colleagues at Mason have been working for years to grow the cross-disciplinary innovation and engineering research activities at the university. In particular, my colleague Liza Wilson-Durant leads the Northern Virginia node of the Commonwealth Cyber Initiative. Mason and other universities too don't always talk about or promote the work that they do for the federal agencies for good reasons, but the body of work has already been significant and it's continuing to grow. So you're exactly right.
And Josh, as a follow-up to that, as you've been having discussions with tech tenants, coming through the buildings that you and Cushman represent in Arlington, what are those conversations, and what are they at the tech talent level? Is it recognized at this point, or is it unknown and you're having to educate folks on what that looks like long term? Because I imagine when you talk about these investments and they're 2, 3, 4 years out, it's hard to envision it, no matter how much you can be educated on the investments that are taking place. From a physical standpoint, obviously these programs are being rolled out before the physical campuses are kind of fully built out. But I imagine that, I keep saying 5 to 10 year leases, 15-year leases. I mean, these are long-term investments that companies are making in a neighborhood, and you're talking about less than half, or in some cases a third of the way through the lease, they're going to have massive tech campuses, kind of straddling the corridor there. Are those conversations happening? And if so, are they happening at the level that we're having it, or is it kind of unknown?
So they're absolutely happening. We have some larger availabilities in Ballston right now that we are working ourselves through. So therefore, we're seeing a lot of corporate and headquarter relocation requirements right now. And that might be both from within the RB corridor, Washington, D.C., Maryland, or further west for individuals seeking locations further east along the Metro line. And yeah, I think half the groups are well educated and know what they're getting themselves into, and I think half the other groups need kind of that reminder of the highly educated workforce, of the millennial base within Ballston specifically. Those things are powerful when we describe them and notify some of these individuals. And then obviously all of the components that come along with that, the residential component being affordable for single families as well as for the millennial base. Then you've got the school systems, and you need to talk about all of those things when you are looking at companies trying to make a substantial investment and potential relocation in a headquarters or an East Coast hub, because they need to make sure that they're doing the right thing for the next 10 to 15 years. And starting with that educational base, starting with the higher education, the millennial base, the mass transportation, and the retail certainly gets us moving in the right direction.
You just answered my next question with that second part, about what you're really telling tenants when they're coming through beyond, the tech component of it. But my kind of commentary on that too is, as the silver line opens up, a lot of folks talk about the tech talent, the innovative tech talent that exists in Arlington and what's coming with these investments in both the Virginia Tech and George Mason campus, as well as what Marymount's doing in Ballston. And you marry that with the fact that the silver line is going to be opening up, in the next year, and that'll be reaching out into the western suburbs, and you'll be able to tap a different type of tech talent. Obviously, we have the mature tech talent in Arlington, in Ballston, but you mentioned the millennials and the housing in the core specifically is really appealing to the younger tech workers, and you'll be able to access those younger tech ones coming out of the universities, and also you'll be able to get the ones that are maybe living a little further out to the west, whether it's in Reston or Vienna. You obviously access them in Vienna via the Orange Line, but the Silver Line really enhances the capacity for the workforce accessibility. I know something that was important to Amazon was not only accessing Arlington's talent, but also accessing the talent that's across the river in DC. And Ballston is really positioned to not only access the talent that exists in the RB corridor, but it also can easily tap the DC tech talent, the folks that choose to live across the river, and very quickly, hopefully in the next year, assuming things go as scheduled, you'll be accessing the far western suburbs, all the way out to Ashburn. You'll be within a one-stop or non-stop metro ride. Not to mention the 2 airports. So if you wanted to fly people in for eventually, probably not anytime in the next 6 to 12 months, but eventually when people start flying en masse again, you'll be able to access those 2 terminals as well. We're running out of time here. We don't have any audience questions, but we have, a couple minutes. So if you have any, feel free to throw them out. Otherwise, I'll just kind of wrap it up with one question, the same one that we asked the previous panel, which is, given the long-term decisions that companies are making when they make a real estate decision, and Josh, you kind of hit on this a little bit, but Paul, I'd like to hear your thoughts as well. What are the, in a sentence or two, what are the selling points of Ballston in the next decade? Josh, we'll go ahead and start with you, and then we'll swing over to Paula and get your thoughts.
Yeah, look, I'll make it real easy. Ballston is the most complete submarket in Northern Virginia. It's that easy. From an office, residential, and retail component, it has everything. Most other submarkets at least lack one of those. And in our opinion, Ballston is the most complete, to keep it short.
And I'll say that Mason students are already more likely to stay and live and work in the region after they go to school. We already have a highly diverse student population, so coming here is a chance for students to go to school, receive cutting edge degrees for the future of work in a really amazing place that will likely have a high paying job at the end. So for students, I think, they should come to be part of the growth, the excitement, and the long-term opportunities here.
Great. Great commentary. I really appreciate it. I will say one final thought on my end. Josh, you mentioned, and Paula, actually, I'll start with something you said earlier. I think you both touched on it, but this region kind of lacked, George Mason's had tremendous growth over the last decade, and has really become the flagship in Northern Virginia. And I think the region's benefited greatly from that growth, and is really getting a reputation around the country. But I think this additional investment is really establishing an innovation core that this region lacked and has lacked for a very long time. And this will be really the final piece that puts us over the edge and really gets us into the conversation with, the other regions that can say, Boston can say they have MIT, the Bay Area can say Stanford, Cornell Tech campus in New York City is a big selling point now, and obviously that's kind of a vision for both Mason and Tech in these campuses. But at the end of the day, Ballston is a complete neighborhood. You mentioned that, Josh. I think it's a neighborhood that is not only is it a complete neighborhood, but it has such easy access to other diverse neighborhoods around the region. It's one of the only, and this is true for Arlington County in general, but with this conversation in Ballston, at a national level. You just don't have neighborhoods like Ballston and Arlington that really have that residential, commercial, retail package mixed with the transportation access to other parts of the region. I know Metro has gotten some flack over the last few years, but they've done a lot of work to bring the network back up to speed, and it's still one of the best and most far-reaching transportation systems in the country. And I think Ballston benefits greatly from that, as does the rest of the region. So
yeah. On the tech side too, if I could add, so just over the last few years, Mason's research has increased 110%. And during that same period of time, invention disclosures at the university have increased 53%. So expect to see more of the same.
That's great. That's huge. Thank you for that. That's good to hear. Well, any closing thoughts from either of you? I think we've covered quite a bit. And between the two panels, we've had a really great conversation. And I hope the folks on the panel, or in the audience, no questions came in. So I hope we covered everything that we said we would. But any closing thoughts from either of you, or you feel pretty good with what's been said so far?
Bring us your tenants to Ballston. That's all I got to say.
Yeah. You're doing our selling for us on that.
Thank you.
Great. All right, well, thanks everybody for joining. It was a really great conversation, and we've recorded this presentation, so it will be online as well later. So thank you everybody, and we will go ahead and wrap it up.
Thank you.